We talk about books a lot on this podcast, but we appreciate that our listeners might not have time to read them all. So how do you know which one to pick? Well, the Space Hipsters Annual Book Prize might be a great place to start.
So we're joined today by Lois Huneycutt and John Whisenhunt, who coordinate the prize to learn more about how the prize gets chosen and what books you might want to put on your Christmas list this year.
Thanks to those who got in touch about our new format. If anyone else has an opinion, please let us know. Get in touch with our social media pages at Space and Things 1 on Twitter and at Space and Things Podcast on Instagram and Facebook, or via the contact form on our website.
Or leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. But right now, enjoy episode 116 of the Space and Things podcast.
Oh my God! Unbelievable! But is it great to done?
You're listening to Space and Things with Dave Giles and Emily Carney.
I'm Emily Carney.
And I'm Dave Giles, and welcome to episode 116 of the Space and Things podcast. How you doing, Emily?
I'm doing great. A little tired, but I'm really excited. Tonight is supposed to be, take 3, is supposed to be the night that Artemis launches. So I'm hoping, it's kind of yucky out here, but I'm hoping the cloud cover will go away by around 1 a.m. And I'm hoping I can see it from where I'm at. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, as we record this, we are 6 hours away from the planned launch of Artemis 1. 6 hours away. So if it's launched or if it hasn't launched, by the time this is out, this is all null and void. But right now, there's that nervous excitement, right?
Yes, I'm excited. At the same time, I'm a little terrified just because I'm like, this is a new rocket, never launched before. So yeah, I really do not know what to expect. I hope I get to see it from here because I want to see that thing go. So we will see. I want to see how it acts.
Okay, so let's get stuck into our main feature. I'm sure many of our listeners are aware of Space Hipsters, but for those of you who might be wondering, it's a Facebook group which Emily founded way back in 2011 and now has nearly 34,000 members. As a member myself, I can safely say that it's one of my favorite places on the internet. It's got an incredible team of moderators who do a great job in making sure that the group celebrates all things spaceflight and that it's used by members to spread knowledge and experience rather than be a place for politics and arguments. You've got engineers, authors, astronauts, historians, all those kind of people in the group, and all of them seem happy to answer questions no matter how obscure or trivial they may seem. And there are various events that go on throughout the year where you can get to know people either virtually or in real life. When I took my big Air and Space Museum trip in 2019, letting the group know what I was doing meant I was able to meet some incredible people and make some great friends. So if you're on Facebook, make sure you join.
A few years back, the Space Hipsters Book Prize was started, and today we're going to be talking to two of the people who run it. Lois Honeycutt is someone who all space hipsters will be aware of. She has been an administrator for the community since 2012 and organizes most of its outreach events. In her other life, she is a professor of medieval European history at the University of Missouri, specializing in questions of women in power. John Whisenhunt is a lifelong space enthusiast and a retired U.S. Air Force officer. He is an information technology consultant and a volunteer astronomy and space science educator. Let's find out more about the Space Hipsters Book Prize.
All right, you want to go for TLI, over? Roger, understand. We're going for TLI.
Welcome, Lois and John. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about the book prize. So, I'll let you decide who's going to answer this, but when did the prize first start, and how was that first prize decided?
It started with an idea in 2016. And as most people in Space Hipsters know, I'm a historian. I mean, that's my day job, academic historian. And I have served on innumerable book prize committees and even chaired a few over the course of my career. And it struck me as I was sort of finishing out my last term on a pretty prestigious prize that, we have a lot of authors in Space Hipsters, a lot of really good books. And we spent a lot of time, even back in 2016, talking about books. And I was sort of, giving out these prizes every year for various historical categories and things like this, serving on these committees thinking, why isn't there a prize for space books or, things like that? Well, it turns out there is one. There is one other prize that I know of besides ours, but it's just one, and it's a huge field. And I really thought that if we could start some kind of recognition process, and I was thinking mostly for hipster authors when we started out, but it grew very quickly to include the entire field, and people were nominating. So that was 2016. It took until 2017. Actually, until 2018, our first prize was given out for books in 2018 for books written in 2017. So, we given out for the previous year. I forgot how many judges we had that year. It might have been 11. We didn't know what to expect. We didn't know what was going to happen, but we had 17 nominees. And the process has been refined over the years. And I think it's been made better every year as we've been working on it. But it was basically the same thing we were doing then that we do now. And that is, recruit a team of well-qualified judges. We try to have about half of them be people who've actually produced books in the field themselves and kind of know what it means to go through that process and what authors are up against when they start a process and deal with publishers and things. What's in an author's control and what's not in an author's control, things like that. And then we recruited a lot of people who are in the space exploration field. And we mean, journalists, museum professionals, educators, all kinds of members of the educated public, I guess we would say, or the reading public, and have a balance there. I think, as I said, that we had 11 judges and we just kind of assigned them books randomly and kind of came to a conclusion. And the first book that won our prize was Scott Kelly's Endurance.
So let's talk about the previous book prize winners. What's won the prize throughout the years? And, can you talk about any maybe surprises or exciting moments during those times?
They've all been memorable, certainly. It's, as Lois will tell you, as she said, as space enthusiasts, whether you're professional or just a lifelong fan of these types of works, everyone's got a passion. And when you start talking about anything that you love, people get, I wouldn't say fired up, but they certainly have their passions come out when the reviews are being written, when the discussions are happening. So, and with so many different backgrounds, I think the diversity of backgrounds is tremendous in this, and that's what's been a lot of fun. But the diversity in winners has also been kind of interesting. Jonathan Ward, for instance, is someone who very well known around the space hipster community and certainly around the space writers community. A very affable guy, great guy to talk to, kind of a polymorph. He's into a little bit of everything. Just having someone who and have hung out with and then look at their work and realize, wow, this is really terrific. I wouldn't say it was a surprise necessarily, but it certainly showed that there's someone strongly within the existing community who can really generate some wonderful writing. And, in this case, it was, Lois, help me with the title, please. It was the Bringing Colombia Home, is that correct?
Yeah, Bringing Colombia Home. And he co-wrote that with Mike Leinbach. And that was the winner of our second book prize.
I mean, just from a personal note, that I currently live in Texas. That was where the disaster, of course, occurred. Colombia being tragically spread out over a great deal of the state, and so that was very touching. I'll mention one more real quick. That's kind of completely the other side. Samantha Cristoforetti, European Space Agency astronaut, won. Was that for 20 or 21?
It was 21. Yeah.
Yeah. And so again, here we had somebody who is a professional space traveler, and as this is going out, I mean, she just came back some weeks ago from her second trip to the space station, first trip as commander, and so certainly it was a delight for us to award an astronaut a book prize. So yes, many memorable situations over the years.
Mm-hmm. That one was a fun one that year because there were a number of astronaut biographies and autobiographies that year. And it was almost the year of the biography. I mean, it just seemed like about half of the books that were nominated that year were biographies. And I don't judge books. I am the coordinator, and I collect book titles and book nominations, and I contact publishers to get copies, and I make sure that readers get their copies, and I make sure that people are reimbursed for their expenses. And do a lot of that kind of stuff, but I don't actually judge the books. But I read a lot of the books, and I'm particularly surprised, and happy when a book will emerge that, we'll get a list of 20 books, and there's that kind of sense that I can kind of guess which 2 or 3 are going to be at the top. I guess, honestly, bringing Colombia home, I knew within the first month that was going to be a really strong contender for the book prize. And the next year was Mel Croft and John Youskauskas' book about the payload specialist, the one that came out with Nebraska. And that one was a complete surprise. That one was one of those books that, a book about payload specialists, that's going to be cool. And yet we were able to, I was kind of watching from above and seeing it sort of rise sort of slowly and steadily through the rankings to the point that I thought, I'm going to read this book. It wasn't one that was on my list to read. It was wonderful. Samantha's book too, I had not read it because we had so many shuttle era astronaut biographies, and I just hadn't picked up that one as going to be one. It was also kind of the year of the woman that year. We had a lot of books that were written by women, and there were, different biographies and things like that. So I wasn't surprised necessarily, because I'll tell you, one of our criteria is that we look at is the originality of the book. And is this a story that we have heard before, maybe told in a compelling new way, or is this adding something that we really don't know? Is this some angle that no one else has taken? So there's a sort of originality and contribution. And I think that an astronaut writing his or her own story well, or a mission controller, or somebody in the field writing his or her story well, they're going to get a few extra points for that originality and new story, because nobody else can tell their story except themselves. Telling it well is an art that, not all of the autobiographies are equal, right? And so, when you get a really outstanding one, and we can all name our favorites, right? We could go around the room right now, and I bet that, we would all pick the same 2 or 3 books as our favorite biographies or autobiographies.
Yeah.
And I think Samantha's, book came out that way.
Interesting. So there's only one book that one winner that we haven't named, and that's this year's prize. Assuming I've got this right, we've got 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, but we haven't mentioned this year's one, which is, it's not an announcement because it's already been announced, but maybe people listening to the podcast don't know. It was Beyond by Stephen Walker.
Yes, who we've had on our show a few times.
We love Stephen Walker. We think he's such a great storyteller. And what's interesting when you look at the other titles that won, and this is the first time in the 5 prizes where it's actually gone to a book telling the old history. We've not had anything from that era yet win a prize. Why do you think his one did well compared to some of the more modern books that are coming out?
I think it was just because he is such a delightful author. Being one of the things when we were awarding the prize, we brought up in the discussion was, of course, his work as a filmmaker, and the way he crafts the book is like he's doing, the historical characters of the actors, and these are film scenes, these chapters in the book, and so I think it was this rich style and imagery that he generated in his work that really touched a lot of people. But you hit on something that Lois said earlier about, give me the stories I haven't heard, or maybe I haven't heard the whole story. It's a very popular genre on, give me the rest of the story. And so in that case, I think his deep research, I think some translated Russian things that had sort of been socked away. And of course, a lot of us had heard him on your podcast. And so it was like, wow, this guy's terrific. And I think people just, responded to his craft being so darn good.
This year, we always say, you give a prize and you say it was a difficult choice and there were a lot of great books and things like this. But I think this year we had not only really strong, really good books, but we had really strong, really good books in a variety of genres. A lot of times I can just tell you which 2 or 3 books are going to win. And this year I was really sitting back looking and thinking, like, there's 6 books here, any one of which is worthy of the prize. I wonder what the judges are going to do, how that's going to come about. And, John was right. People do tend to get very passionate about a book that they have read. There's this thing called the leveling bias. And that means that a lot of times people who have a lot of choices they'll pick the first choice that's really good and really compelling, and it's the book you read and you really like. And that book, if you read it early on, every other book has to measure up to it, right? And so we had judges with strong feelings about a book that they had read early on that were really not going to give it up. But it was amazing to me that as that book began to, emerge as one or two, we had a book, Eric Berger's book, the SpaceX book, went pretty high before it was eliminated. And there were people who were very strongly in favor of that book, right? And Bruce McCandless's book, was a very strong favorite. French and Al Worden's book, my goodness, what a sentimental favorite, right? And it was so well done, besides being a, sentimental favorite. And we could just go on and on about how many great books that we had. But it was interesting to me that as people who had their strong feelings about whatever book then read beyond, because they knew that was the book, it became the book that people were going to, going to have to read and going to have to vote on. So many people said, wow, okay, I still like my book, but if this one wins, I'll be okay. And then I think that when we did the final vote, John, did we get unanimity, or were there one or two? It was very close to unanimous.
It was, I think, about 90%. Yeah.
About 90%. Okay. So, when we did 1 year, I was literally, this was before John joined as the co-coordinator. The last year before John did as a co-coordinator, I was literally waiting for the last judge to contact me before I knew who won.
Wow.
We had ended up with 13 judges that year, and I was sitting there looking at 6 and 6. Not knowing which book was going to win until about 5 minutes before the deadline.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Which does lead me on to the question about how this all gets judged. How do the books get nominated? And how they then judge? Is it teams? What happens? How does it work?
So yeah, Lois actually started out, and again, Lois, jump at any time, but just contacting the authors and the publishing houses. We're really, really fortunate. Like 2019, of course, because of the anniversary of Apollo 11, 50th anniversary events, you got a huge upsurge in space publishing just based around that. But not about just huge historic event, but all sorts of things. Really started to grow. I think Lois would agree. That was about the time that they started, then the publishers, particularly in the past 2 years, have really have become aware of the prize. It's something that an author, of course, now can tout that, hey, look, here's another recognition I've gotten. And so publishers now we're avalanching Lois with nominations. And so that's been quite delightful, when you've got more goodness than you can handle. But same thing with recruiting people to become part of the effort. As we've said earlier, you've got a huge community of professionals, authors, enthusiasts, scientists. all sorts of people to draw from. And the good news is most of them like to read anyway. Mm-hmm. And so Lois, generally privately, to preserve people's anonymity, because of course there are a lot of people in the business who are involved, will just say, hey, would you be interested? And so I think the recruitment has been. Although Lois would probably tell you it's been difficult at times because people are busy and a lot of things going on in the world. But and then I'll hit real quick here. How is the judging done? Very simply, and Lois, we sort of codified some of the things Lois mentioned earlier. We said, is this something new? Is this something we've not seen? Are you taking a fresh look at a historic series of incidents? Did it touch you personally? Is this something that you found an easy read? Did you find it challenging? Did you find it some combination of those? Is it a well done book? Is it factual? Because we've got so many pedantic nerds in this community, if you spot something apocryphal, you go, whoa, oh, no, the Saturn V did not have that. But people tend to catch the little blips here and there, and so we just we basically kind of Lois has a lovely kind of in process where it gives the judges what we'd like you to do if you're up for that, and then we sort of put together a little rubric and say, well, these are the things we'd like you to think about. And then we asked people to write a review, and we started a discussion.
When we started out, and we still do this, I hit a lot of the space communities and space bulletin boards and Facebook groups where space nerds hang out and authors hang out. So, when we are accepting nominations, which will open for 2023 on the 15th, so just a few days from when this podcast goes out, I guess, I hit all those places and just say, we're accepting nominations, and this is how you nominate a book, and this is, what the categories are. We accept books in astronomy, space exploration, and space history. We've had some really, a strong favorite. I think the runner-up one year, for instance, was Alan Stern and David Grinspoon's Chasing New Horizons, right? Planetary science is something. When we defined the categories, we sort of thought about, what do we talk about in Space Hipsters? What are the kinds of things that excite the community? Because the book prize was, initially for the community. And it really was planetary science, exploration, all the stuff, the Mars rovers going up and down, and the New Horizons mission, Cassini, all those things people want to hear about. So astronomy, space exploration, and then space history. I started out sending notices to just a couple of publishers, but over the years, as we started to get in different books, we noticed that a lot of really good books were coming from certain publishers. And so then the next year I would reach out to them and do that. And as John said, now we have publishers contacting us saying, are you accepting nominations yet? Or one year, one university press just nominated their entire aviation list. That was the year we had 27 nominees. And we decided 27 nominees was too hard for our judges. Yeah, what we do is, we try to look for a mix of people from different sectors. Judges have generally asked for anonymity, and it really is I think it's good that we do that. It's a small community, and there may be a time when someone has to vote against a book their best friend wrote, and that's hard enough without having to justify it to your best friend. We do allow judges, if they want, to tell people that they are judges, but they can't reveal the names of fellow judges. So, we have done that. We've gone from a team of 11 now to a team of 20, and I think that works really well. We divide the 20 judges up into 4 teams of 5 judges each, and then we just start assigning books more or less round robin as the nominations come in. And we also do some pre-reading sometimes when we're not sure that a book will meet our criteria. Every once in a while we'll have a theoretical physics book or something nominated that we don't send to a team. And I guess one of the things that has happened is that over the years, we have had some terrific books that are mostly visually oriented, art books, photography collections, and things like that. And we've noticed our judges' feedback was, we can't judge these against the other books, the more text-based books and things like that. They're just too different. They're both great, but we can't judge apples and oranges. And so just 2 years ago, we approached the IAAA, the International Astronomical Artists Association, and asked them if they would be willing to co-sponsor a book on visual on books that are mostly visual. So that we could, honor 2 different books. And it just so happened that last year we had 0 books that were nominated that fit that criterion. So we haven't done that yet, but I'm pretty sure that we'll be doing that this year, bringing in an IAAA to judge visual culture books. So that we'll be giving out 2 books, or it could turn out that a visual culture book turns out to be the best book overall. We haven't really decided on how to handle that, if that happens.
So, right, I'm going to draw you down even further here. So you've got 4 teams of 5, and they get a load of books assigned to them. Then what happens? How do we get to the winner?
We try to make judges be mean. What do you say that's the hardest part, John?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we have to introduce the concept of. You have to come up with a number 1 book, and that does require, as Lois said, you're asking people who tend to be a pretty pleasant group to be around, but as Lois said, I'm asking you to be mean. I'm asking you to take someone who may be a favorite author or a personal friend or an acquaintance and say that I'm sorry, but your work doesn't quite measure up to another one. So it really, even though we have a rubric and we have some, let's call them slightly objective criteria, it still comes down to the gut. And so, yeah, you're forcing someone to declare what they're most passionate about. And even though we have an actual process and an outline to use and some things to consider, it still comes down to discussions. And we do ask at the end of your review, we need a numerical rating. We use a scale, and we need you to quantify that, and that's hard to do.
Yeah. So what we do is that each one of these teams has a team leader. And it really is the team leader's responsibility to parcel out the books that are assigned to the team among the members of the team. Each team is going to read. There are going to be about 5 books per team. Each team member is going to read at least 3. Many team members volunteer to read all 5 that are assigned to the team, and then they rank them. And they write reviews, and each one reads the other one's review. And sometimes they'll ask to read a book that they're not, the other people aren't sure about, or if there's a tie. Each group is allowed to send from 0 to 2 books for the next round of competition. And, it could be with 20 books that one team would say, we read a lot of good books, but we didn't read a great book. We just really don't feel like we have the winner among these 5 books. And then they would send up no books. They may have one that they're very enthusiastic about. They may reach a point within the group that there is a tie. We discourage that, but we do allow a group to send up 2 books if they honestly cannot decide between the books. So we would have normally between 4 and 8. And, we kind of call them finalists, but we're too small a prize to really sort of give out finalist awards or anything like these. But maybe they're books that we would be looking at for second round consideration. I think that's a better term than finalists, that these books are going to receive a second round of consideration. And then it becomes a free-for-all among the judges. We leave our team leaders in place to help us decide who gets what book, but any judge then can request to read any book that has made it into that consideration. And about every week after the first round, I start, and John starts kind of nagging people for, okay, it looks like this book is not getting enough reading. So is it because nobody's interested in it? Is it because, the first round wasn't as enthusiastic? Can we get a couple of people to look at that? And we gradually begin to then say, okay, and we use a scale of 1 to 4. And this book has a lot of 2s, but no 1s. Are we ready to let this one go? And getting the judges to say yes to that is one of the hardest things to do. It's like, well, can we hold on to it for another week? And I'm going, what's going to happen in a week? The book is not going to change. You're not going to change. The numbers are not going to change. Can we do this? Can we move this process along? And that becomes our job. I mean, we become the nagging parents to say, it really looks to us from the heights here that these 3 books are receiving all the attention, all the glowing reviews, all the whatever. If you're going to vote to eliminate this book, I'm going to ask that you at least read it. If you're not ready to do this, why aren't you ready? Well, I haven't read it. Well, then read it. We'll get it to you. It can get frustrating, as John knows. I've, contacted him at times and saying, I'm going to tear my hair out.
Yeah, you've contacted me before and was like, I'm never doing this again 1 year. I swear to God, you actually wrote that in a message. I'm never doing this again. I forgot what year it was, and I was like, oh, no.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was over. I don't even remember. All I know is you were like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, oh, my God.
Well, that actually does bring us to, Dave and I talked about this when I saw him in England this summer, is that we started this as an experiment. Is this something that the Space Hipsters community could do that would be of use, good to the entire space enthusiast community or to the Space Hipsters community, right? Is this, are we helping our authors? It was lovely when Jonathan and Mike's book came out in a paperback edition and, it said on the front, winner of the Space Hipsters Book Prize or things like that.
That is cool. Yeah, I saw that. I was at Kennedy Space Center and I was at the, the space shop and I saw that and I was like, what? That's actually, it's really neat.
I mean, I do think we give our authors something of a signal boost, although I'm not quite sure, how much of a signal boost that we give in terms of increased sales. I'm always on there. I don't know if you've noticed me on the Space Hipsters, Facebook group, but whenever someone mentions a book, I'll say, oh yeah, that was nominated for our book prize. I say that constantly so that people will say, oh, well, what other good books might be nominated for the Space Hipsters Book Prize and things like that. And I have had a couple of dozen people tell me that they have bought a book or been interested in a book because it won a prize or because of an author chat that we did at the end. I think we had that one year where we had the 4 authors who had written about women, the year that Samantha won, where several people who were on the chat told me they bought all 4 books. They just went and bought all 4 books after meeting the authors. So I think that, it does do that. But it is a really expensive and time consuming. It's time consuming for everybody. It's time consuming for John and me. It's time consuming for the judges. It's expensive to acquire all the books that we need and ship out the books that we need. So, I mean, there is that kind of constant buzz in the back of my mind about whether this prize is valuable to the community as I would like it to be. And it's, 5 or 6 years in, it's, those conversations, we have them from time to time. What do you think, Emily?
I think it certainly is valuable. I'm glad we're doing it. I've supported it since the beginning, mainly because there aren't many spaceflight book prizes. Like you said, I think there's the Eugene M.A. Award, but that's just one. Mm-hmm. There's not much that rewards like spaceflight literature excellence out there. And there's so many books like over the years that I've read, that are spaceflight books, and they're not just good space books. Mm-hmm. They're just magnificent books, they're great works of literature, and I look at them and I'm like, why didn't this win like any kind of, any prize, like a popular book prize? Like there's a few books I've read like that. I'm like, why didn't this get a Pulitzer, or something like that. Mm-hmm. I think space books are important. I think books in general still matter as we sort of get further into everything being electronic. People still like the feel of the paper. They still like that experience, that luxe experience of sitting down and reading a book.
Right.
And I think it's cool that we champion that and champion the authors. There's certainly, within Space Hipsters itself, there's obviously probably hundreds of incredible writers in there. And it's, as a writer myself, it's really humbling because there's some people and I'm like, man, this person is so freaking talented. Like, I would love to write like that. And, and outside of hipsters as well. I'm not sure if Stephen Walker is a space hipster, but I mean, his book is magnificent. So, I mean, I think it's really important to champion those kind of things. Mm-hmm. This actually leads me to my next question. Nominations are opening soon for the 2022 book prize. I think you said November 15th.
Yeah, it's the 2023 book prize for books written in 2022.
What kinds of books do you think will be nominated this year? You don't have to mention specific books, but what do you guys? What
yes,
do
you do?
Oh God, Dave is the devil's advocate.
I think we can talk about specific books. I mean, I think there's a lot of buzz going around. And even as we say, there's a lot of buzz going around about certain books. I also want to say that some of the books that have won were books that rose to the top that there really wasn't a lot of buzz going around, pre-publication. But, every year there are books that people have already read. I mean, it's been a long time since January when the first of the books that will be nominated came out. And so, we know about those. And I just went over to Collect Space today to actually update something about Stephen Walker winning our prize. I never had done that. I just realized. And noticed that, they talk about books as they come out. There's 5 or 6 there that I hadn't heard about that, will probably be nominated. I mean, we have a nomination process that goes from November to January. So it's a 60-day nomination process. If we get a book nominated toward the end of that process, and then I contact the publisher, and then we wait 2 to 3 weeks to get that, it's already into mid-March before we even have that book to judges. So we have started this year. This is an experiment with our experienced judges, because we have judges coming back for a 3rd or 4th year this year, maybe even a 5th year, I'm not sure. Just saying, look, if you read a book this year that you think, should be nominated, like feel free, even early on, to nominate it yourself, to get reading and starting that. So we have 5 or 6 books. Would you say, is that how many, John? Or maybe even more?
My gut says there were 8 on that list, but maybe I'm
8. Okay. Yeah. So about 8 books already that members of the judging team have said, I have read this book, and, if no one else nominates this year, I will. So I've already got books into the hands of judges even before the official nomination period begins.
So let's get personal now. Away from the prize, what are your favorite space books or your favorite type of space book? Do you have a favorite? Do you like a biography? Do you like a photo book? Do you like a history book? Do you like a scientific book? What's your favorite type or favorite book?
Being of a particular era, it's a very common response as to a favorite. But I would have to say if we use the old what is the only book I could take to being deserted on an island, I would take Michael Collins' Carrying the Fire. To me, that is the all-time best book written about the space program, certainly by an astronaut. But I would say it's very hard to come off that pinnacle. Now that said, one of the books which has just been released, and it's the Apollo remastered. It is what we called growing up a coffee table book. It is an enormous tome. It probably weighs 10 kilograms, but it's an utterly brilliant experience. So again, it's a book in that it's bound and published on paper, and it's completely unlike anything that I have picked up in probably the past dozen years. I would say the chances of it ending up on my top 5 space books of all time is probably pretty high. But to answer your question a little more depth, yeah, I do have a certain fondness for astronaut biographies and certainly autobiographies. I would have to say that Albert and Francis French's first book is also in that top 5, simply because for me, as much as I love reading about someone who had adventures in space, if they start out, I always wanted to fly, I go, oh, I've heard this before. But if they start out, no, I never wanted to fly, I go, ah. So, that's one of the things I loved about how utterly different you've got with these, these are 2 memoirs, and yet they're very, very different. But then again, I go back to something like, okay, the Payload Specialist, the Come Fly With Us book. I absolutely did not expect to love this, and yet here's a space history that's, quite factually based. I mean, it's like fiercely nonfiction, and yet it was a delight to read. So, my wife is a huge fiction fan. And she's like, gosh, you never come out of that nonfiction aisle. You're always over there with the histories and things. But that's what I love. So I would say that certainly a wonderful memoir by someone who's had the experience of space travel is going to be up there for me.
If you ask people who read a lot of space books, what's your favorite? It's like, okay, can we disagree that Mike Collins is everybody's favorite and then talk about the others?
Yeah.
Because,
yeah.
I mean, everybody's there. It's like, that's number 1 and number 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And now, okay, here's my 6th favorite book, because Mike Collins is my top 5 favorite books right there. I mean, for everyone. And so I have some quirky biographies that I really like. That one of my favorites that I really like that doesn't make other people's list is Scott Carpenter's biography for Spacious Skies.
Amazing book.
The ending of that book, I won't try to do it, but it is so poignant. It's really well written. It's a wonderful collaboration with his daughter, with whom he had a really kind of difficult relationship because he was in and out of her life. And she kind of chased him down to do the book, to try to establish an adult relationship with her father. And it worked beautifully. So, there's that. So I love those. Mike Mullane's book makes me laugh out loud every time I read it. But I have to say my very favorite is a book that I'm a historian, a history book with a lot of moving parts told really well by the people that write them. And so I love Francis and Collins, the 2 books on the Mercury and Gemini program, Into That Silent Sea, and then the Shadow of the Moon. I absolutely adore and have assigned to students Andy's, the Man on the Moon book that was the basis for that's another classic that everyone talks about. One of my favorites, because I learned so much from it, and I just went out and asked a lot more questions afterwards and met fantastic people, was Rick Houston's Mission Control book. I think that's a really, really lovely book. I'm not going to name any favorites from this year's competition because I think that's probably, I think we have some really good ones. And I think we have some that are generating a lot of buzz. I think we're going to have a smaller pool this year, but I don't think it's going to be any easier to arrive at a decision.
I agree. Some great books this year. So I guess we'll wait till about April time to find out which one has won so we can be recommending another book to our listeners. Of course, that's one of the great things about this.
Well, and when someone asks you do you know any good space books, you've got a ready-made list that's already been through a quite healthy evaluation and has, the endorsement of quite a few people. So,
yeah,
absolutely.
That's been curated.
So thanks very much for joining us, both of you. This has been wonderful to hear all about this prize and how it works. And I'm sure we'll talk soon. Actually, we'll all be seeing each other soon at the Cosmospheres.
Yeah.
I'm so
Space
excited.
Hipster Prom.
Amazing.
Hello there, sports fans. You got a little bit of me plus Neil's in the center couch, and Buzz is doing the camera work this time. Roger. Well, I put on a coat and tie if I'd known about this ahead of time.
Wow, the book prize.
I really like the fact that it really is a serious book prize. You know, it's not like, you know, I'm glad they got that across because, you know, there's some people out there who are trolls who are very critical of space hipsters, you know, and usually, I hate saying this, I'm going to get crapped on. It's because we removed their post or something like that.
Yeah,
you know, they're mad. They're mad because we removed their post or something like that. So there are people out there who can be very critical, but I love the fact that we've established, I think, a very credible book prize, Space Literature Prize. I'm very proud of that.
I would be.
And I don't take any credit for it because I give all the credit to Lois and John and the judges, honestly, because I'm just the person who pushed the button for the group. And I think Lois asked, you know, hey, can we do a book prize? I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. Go ahead, you know, and mainly because I was always like, man, there's like one space book prize. So if you write a space book, that's it. That's the only prize, you know, and I thought that was kind of silly.
I think the fact that this comes from a community as well, I think that gives it a different weight for a different prize. It ultimately has a different set of criteria than another prize would have.
Exactly. You know, I don't know who judges I think it's the MA prize. I don't know who judges it, and I'm not passing any judgment on that prize. It's very prestigious, and I know a few people who've won it, which is awesome, but my guess is, you know, probably a space history community or something like that. You know, people who kind of had that very specific niche, whereas Space Hipsters, I think, is more, you know, community based, which I think is really cool, you know, and I'm very proud of it. To me, it's important that it's something that kind of represents like the space community at large, I guess. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. I didn't want to sound like I was crapping on anything.
No,
I'm definitely not, you know, I mean, there is a space history prize, but that's more for like the aggregate sum of work. It's the Ordway prize, I think, but that's more for like separate space historians who've had work over a series of years and type of, I don't think it's really for space literature specifically, but yeah. I think a lot of the books that are nominated for the space prize, you know, and win the space prize, you know, to me, they don't qualify as just good space books. They're great literature.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a great thing. So for those people who might want to find out what books have been nominated, there is obviously just you can search in Space Hipsters and find the list of nominations. But if you just like going on Twitter, there is a Space Hipsters Book Prize Twitter account which posts about the books that are nominated with a caption from one of the judges' reviews. If you follow that, or you look at that list, or you're in Space Hipsters and you're looking out for the post for that, or you search for the post for that, you'll get an insight into what one of the reviewers or two of the reviewers may have said about each of the books. And you get a feel for what's out there. And I think that's the wonderful thing it is for someone like me. I've found out about a lot of books which I had no idea existed because of this prize. And they may not have gone on to win, but books that have been an interest to me because of the prize, even before we started doing this podcast, where obviously we keep our eyes peeled for all books and things like that. And I think that's wonderful. I think for the casual space enthusiast, I think that's a good thing because you often will hear when Buzz has got a new book out or one of the big guys has got a big book out.
Yeah, one of the big celebrities, you know, Neil deGrasse Tyson or something like that. Yeah,
exactly.
You know?
And they're good books, but often there's some great books that come from people who you haven't heard of. And I think that's what this does. It allows them to have a platform on the same level as those. And I think that's a wonderful thing. So Lois and John are doing a great job. And within the show notes, there will be links to those accounts so you can find them. If you're not part of Space Hipsters, consider joining. If Facebook's not your thing, that's all right as well. Maybe find that Twitter account so you can find out the books. And the full video of that interview will be on our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/space and things.
Hey, traffic, we read you loud and clear. And for your info, Flipper got a visual on you, and he also picked up Surveyor. Hey, Oscar. Hey, where are we?
So, Emily, what caught your eye this week?
My answer is really basic this week. I'm very excited about Artemis tonight. I'm praying that I can see it from where I'm at tonight. I'm not on the Space Coast. I'm actually on the other side of the coast, on the other side of Florida. I live in Pinellas County, so I'm hoping I was going to drive to like a local fishing pier and that faces the right direction. And hopefully I'll be able to view it from here. If not, I'll have my phone with me, so at least I'll be able to see it from that. So I'm hoping, praying that we'll see a launch tonight. That would be really cool. So I kind of have been pre-gaming a bit. I got in the mood by reading, I have talked about this book way too damn much the last few weeks, but I'm just going to mention it again. I got in the mood by reading some of Apollo Remastered by Andy Saunders. So
yeah, you did.
Yeah, I did. I've talked about that book a lot, but it really, I mean, it's just totally just a mood setter. It really gets you in that vibe of, okay, we're going to go visit the moon again. We're going back to the moon. Yes, it totally gets you into that mood. So I've been kind of looking at it throughout. Today I did go to work, but I have been kind of, visiting it throughout the day. Like, this is so cool. Oh my God, we're going to do this again. So that's really what's been on my mind this week. And I'd like to say, by the time this podcast is released, if the rocket has launched, it's kind of a moot point. But I'm hoping and praying that NASA have a safe and a successful launch. So that's really all I've got this week. So, Dave, what has caught your eye this week?
Well, there's been a few things that have caught my eye this week. I think the one that's probably got the most coverage, it's been the History Channel thing where they've found a big chunk of the Space Shuttle Challenger, which is pretty crazy. I don't want to talk about that, but it has caught my eye. I don't think it couldn't, because everyone's been talking about it, right? It's been everywhere. So I will put that within the show notes for those who haven't seen it. Go and check that out. But the thing that has caught my eye that I want to talk about is the landing of the Boeing X-37, the sixth flight of the... What I mean, this is the thing, right? This is what I want to talk about it. Because what the hell is it, right? So for those of you who don't know, this is like it looks like a mini space shuttle orbiter that they put in a payload fairing on a rocket and it launches. And this thing has been up in space. This is the sixth launch of one of these. And it's been up in space for 908 days. And then it's landed on the runway at Kennedy Space Center. Apparently there was a big sonic boom at 4:30 a.m. the other day.
Yes, there was. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it actually woke my ass up. Like I forgot. I think it was Saturday or Sunday, but all I know is I was kind of half asleep for some reason. I don't know. I may have gone up and gone to the restroom or something. I have no idea, but I was half asleep and all of a sudden I hear boom, boom. And I'm like, what? It wasn't a double boom, but it was just the sonic boom. And I was like, we live not very far from an Air Force base. So I was thinking, well, maybe somebody's just doing joyrides. I don't know. Maybe somebody's doing something up there. Later that day, it was like, oh yeah, the X-37 has... I was like, there we go. That's what happened. But yeah, a sonic boom surprise. That's what that was.
Yeah. Shout out to our chief meme officer, Todd, for making sure that I definitely was going to cover this week, because there's lots of speculation about what this thing could have been doing up there for 900 days. Now, this is a top secret mission for Space Force. It was Air Force when it went up, but of course the Space Force has since become a thing and took over the mission. Yeah, it's just a crazy little thing, isn't it? I mean, what is it? What is it?
Yeah.
It can't hold a crew. And I don't think it can rendezvous with anything. It can hold up to about 500 pounds of experiments. I've translated that into your language.
It's not a lot.
That's not a lot, is it? That's not a lot. And it can deliver satellites. Apparently, the orbit path of this one, it couldn't have been used to spy. It wouldn't have gone the right places to be spying on people or something like that.
I know a very little about surveillance, and usually satellites that spy, I want to say, are polar orbits, north to south. Whereas this, I'm guessing it must have been west to east or something like that, so it probably couldn't spy over anything. If I'm wrong, somebody please reach out and tell me. I wouldn't mind being corrected, but, and I think it had a service module on it too, which I'm like, why did it need a service module?
Yeah. And that may still be up in space as well. Although they're talking about the fact they're going to be bringing it down safely. But that's still a bit odd. But here's one. So, you know how we often mention Jonathan McDowell? He tracks things in space and he's a great astronomer.
Yeah.
Okay, he was quoted at some point as saying that the X-37 has been releasing satellites and hasn't reported them as is required by the United Nations, which is pretty crazy. So I don't know how he knows this. I haven't looked into it that much, but I'm just aware that there is a quote by him that says that this thing has been releasing satellites which haven't been reported.
Yeah, I'm almost expecting a knock at my door like, ma'am, this is Carl from the NSA. We're here to talk to you about some things. Like, that is very odd that they weren't reported. That's very...
If it happened.
You have a point.
But Jonathan McDowell's normally quite trustworthy. But, who knows? Who knows?
These aren't the satellites you're looking for. It's like Star Wars.
Yeah, there it is.
It's like Star Wars. This is not what you're looking for. Oh, okay. We weren't looking for those satellites. All right.
I mean, I love the look of this thing. I think it's an amazing little craft. But what's it been up there doing for 900 days? That's a long time in space to be floating around.
That's a long
up there.
time to go to the corner store for a bottle of milk, 900 days.
Yeah,
What are you doing up there? Why did it take so long? Did you lose your wallet or something? What is going on up there? What I love is that in Florida, we get the surprise sonic booms from it. Basically unannounced.
Then I should warn you, right? By the way, this thing's coming back. No, boom. 4:30 in the morning. What the hell was that?
Yeah, with a shuttle, if it was scheduled to land at a certain time, it would be like right on point. Boom, boom. Okay, that was the space shuttle, and this was just a surprise. I was half asleep and I was like, man, they must be doing something at MacDill nearby. And my poor cat Bandit, for those of you, he's the black and white kitty. He was like looking at me like, what the hell was that? And I was like, I don't know. I was guessing MacDill. Turns out it was the X-37. So yeah.
So that's what it's been doing. It's been up there for 900 days, waiting to wake you up at 4:30 a.m. Just one random day. Do you know what? Today's the day I'm gonna stop her getting a lie in. It's a weekend. Nah, she doesn't get a lie in today. Boom.
Yeah, and honestly, I did not think it was the X-37. My mind honestly went to maybe somebody's doing something at MacDill because we have MacDill nearby. We have a few other. Well, we shouldn't be getting any sonic booms from the other airports because they're like passenger. Reports. If we get a sonic boom from those, there's something wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, something horrible has happened, And
all right, so that's what's caught my eye this week. Just what the hell was it? Anyway.
Yeah, that may have been a small one for Neil, but that's a long one for me.
That's it for this week. So as we've said a few times, we're a few hours away from Artemis 1. Hopefully, by the time this episode comes out, we'll have something to celebrate. But yeah, it feels odd that we've done this episode and there's a big thing hanging over us that this incredible rocket may have launched for the first time, and we're not going to really have responded to that before that comes out. Anyway, we'll talk. Hopefully, we'll have something to talk about next week. For those of you who are Patreon subscribers of the show, I suggest that you log in and check my latest post in there. We've got 3 interviews coming up, which are pretty special. So if you have any questions, we'd love to know them. Of course, any of you can join at any time. Just head over to patreon.com/space and things. I'm going to be posting quite a lot in there over the next month when I've got my trip in the US coming up, and doing some things in aerospace museums, so I'll be posting stuff in there. If you're interested in that, come and join us over on Patreon.
Yes, and thank you to all for listening, and thanks for supporting what we do, and thanks for pressing that share button. Tune in next week to find out all about Al Warden's Corvette, but until then, don't forget, in space, no one can hear you me.
Space and Things has been brought to you by And Things Productions.